So good morning. We will continue our discussion from the previous class where we are discussing about the basic governing equations that are used in computational methods in thermal and fluid engineering. Okay. So let us quickly discuss what we had discussed in the previous class. I hope you can see the screen. Can somebody confirm? You can see the
Yes, sir.
notes? Okay, thank you. So we had discussed the most fundamental equations for conservation, which were mass conservation or continuity equation, and momentum conservation equation. Momentum conservation equation we noted can be like it's a multi-directional equation, so it has separate equations in x direction, y direction, and z direction. Then energy conservation equation, and in some cases there can be species conservation equation where there is a concentration variation. And what we noted was that all these equations of were the same basic form, where there were four terms. So if the conserved parameter is phi, this equation can be written as del t of rho phi, where this first term is the unsteady or transient term, variation with time. Then there is a second term which is the effect of velocity or effect of flow, which is given by del dot rho u phi. Then the third term is the effect of diffusion. Like without velocity also, the parameter diffuses, goes from one place to another place because of concentration gradient. So this is given by del dot gamma del phi. And if there is any source term or sink term for the parameter, like some heat is generated, so then we will have a source term in the energy equation. If some flow is coming in say, or is being generated at any position. So if I solve a 2D problem, and from the third direction some flow is coming in, that also can be accounted for as a source term, which can be put here. So these are the four parameters, and writing the governing equations, all the conservation equations in this form has a lot of significance, because now our task in the entire course is to develop numerical algorithms for discretizing each of these terms. So each of this is a partial derivative, right? So we have to convert this to algebraic form, and this is based on the grid that is generated. So you are dividing the entire domain into small subdomains. So for each subdomain, you want to approximately write each of these terms in a simpler form. So that is the task that we have going forward in the entire course. So step by step we will see. So first we will see how to tackle this term, diffusive term, then the unsteady term. Then we will see how to tackle the convective term. And finally, we will see for the momentum equations, because the momentum equations are coupled, how to tackle the momentum equations. So this way what will happen is that we can develop general algorithms for any equation, and then you can put the correct value of phi, like whether phi is temperature or concentration, and what is gamma, whether it's conductivity or diffusivity, and automatically our algorithm will solve the equation. So some comments on the conservation equation. Feel free to ask any questions if you have any doubts. Okay.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yes. Please tell
Sir,
me.
in momentum conservation equation,
Yes.
sir, what is the interpretation of the second term in left hand side?
This one. Huh?
Sir, yes, sir.
Del dot
Second,
rho u.
yes, sir.
This is actually this is known as the inertial term. So in terms of interpretation, if you want to say, this is the you can say that the momentum that is carried in any direction by the flow. So for example, if I take one of this term, rho vu, okay. Rho u is easy to understand. Momentum being carried in the u direction. Momentum rho u in the u direction. what is the change in momentum in the y direction? What is the change of the rho u means x direction momentum in the y direction v? Similarly, this third term is also there. Okay, so you have momentum in the u direction, so say x direction. Some flow is coming in the x direction, but you also have velocity in the y direction, the other direction. So it will try to push the flow in the other direction also. Because of that, what change is happening, that is taken care of by this term. It is similar to the convective heat transfer terms. It is similar to, instead of, so here momentum is being carried in all the three directions. Instead of that, here enthalpy or temperature is being carried in all the three directions. If I see the energy equation, in the energy equation, you have the temperature being, where is the, so it is, yes, temperature is being carried in the all the three directions due to the flow in these directions. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So some comments on the equations we have discussed previously. Again, let us repeat. Coupled, these are coupled systems of nonlinear partial differential equations. So partial differential equations because there are multiple independent parameters like x, y, and time t, and the dependent parameter which can be temperature, or which can be velocity, or which can be concentration. They depend on a combined effect of these independent parameters x, y, and t, means they vary with the x, y, z direction as well as time t. Okay. As a result, the variation with each of these directions is given by a partial derivative, like del u del x, del u del y, okay, del u del t. So because there are variation in the other directions also. So some of the equations are non-linear, or it is not always non-linear, but momentum equations are non-linear because the coefficients themselves contain the velocity term, and energy equation or general conservation equation can become non-linear if any of these coefficients, say for example gamma, becomes a property of, or is a function of phi. In that case, you cannot directly find the phi, because for solving the equation you need to know the value of gamma, but if it is a function of phi, you will not be able to know the value of gamma because phi itself is unknown. So then you need to go for a iterative method. You have to use the previous value of phi to calculate gamma, and based on this gamma you have to find a new value of phi. Again, once you find a new value of phi, you have to use that to find the new value of gamma. Again, you have to find new value of phi, and you have to keep doing it until there is no more change that is occurring, which we call as that converged. The solution has converged or reached convergence, that there is no change in the solution that is occurring. So if the coefficients themselves are functions of the variable, dependent variable, then it becomes non-linear. And it means that it is much more difficult to solve. Coupled also, because say for example, the temperature equation has velocity terms within it. So without knowing the velocity, you cannot solve the temperature. Similarly, u velocity equation has v velocity magnitudes in it. So without knowing the v velocity, you cannot solve the u velocity. Similarly, v velocity equation has u velocity. So these are coupled. So these needs to be solved together. Otherwise, you cannot find the correct result. So as a result, it is very difficult to solve analytically, and we have discussed that for most of the cases, general closed form solutions has not been found. And in some cases, it is even not known whether there is a solution or not. Means the mathematician cannot even tell whether in future there will be a possible solution or not, because it may happen that there is no closed form solution, or it may happen that there is a closed form solution, but it is very difficult to find. Okay. So this is a very challenging open problem, and a lot of mathematicians over the world are trying to solve this Navier-Stokes problem in particular. So for some easy cases, there are analytical solutions. So for example, if you consider heat transfer energy equation, For 1D and 2D heat transfer, there are analytical solutions. Unsteady case also there is analytical solution. Unsteady 1D case. Then for flow also there are some analytical, like quite complicated analytical solutions for boundary layer theories. Then for some simpler flows like flow in a pipe, okay, Poiseuille flow. Then flow in between parallel plates, which is known as Couette flow. So on all these cases, we do have analytical solutions because a lot of approximations can be done in those cases. However, for most general cases where you have a complicated geometry and most of the terms of the equations are present, we need some sort of numerical solution, and that is why we are learning this course to find out what are the numerical solutions that are possible. So some of the basic strategies to solve the CFD problems, okay, before we jump into the CFD problem. First is that, as I was discussing, if we can formulate all the equations in this form, it is very advantageous to us because then we can just develop a general algorithm for solving this equation, and we can use the same algorithm for solving temperature equation, concentration equation, flow equation like this. Okay. So try to bring all the equations into the standard form, same form, so that the same solution procedure can be used for all the equations. Keep this open here. Then for each of the terms, develop general methods for discretizing them. So unsteady term, convection term, diffusion term. So to use those methods, we want to put the equation so that the unsteady term, convection term, and diffusion terms are of this form, of this general form. Okay. So whatever extra terms are present, so some of the terms may not fit in any of these terms. Okay. All of them can be put together in the source term. Treatment of the source term is not difficult. We will see later. So any term which do not conform to this format of three terms, we can put them together in the source term. Okay, put all the remaining terms as source term, which means that the source term need not be the actual source. It need not be the physical source. Even if there is no physical source, like no heat generation or anything, still there may be some terms as the source term because of the way how the equation is formulated. Okay, some of the terms may go to the source term, and that is how we solve the equations in practical problems. Like if you do research in CFD, many of you may be doing, and if you are writing based on a code, if you are trying to solve a problem, we'll see that there is a standard format for solving the equation. And if we want to modify the equation, say we have some extra effect like magnetic effect, we are solving a solidification problem, we have magnetic effect or any other effect. We put all these terms as source term because we don't want to change the solution algorithm for the three other terms, because it will then mean that we have to change the entire code. But putting a different source term is not a difficult task. So any extra term we put, if there are 5 source terms, we will put 5 source terms. Then now there are different concerns also while formulating the source terms that we will discuss later in the course. How to treat the source term. Let us look at an example. So let us consider a 2D heat transfer problem with phase change, where there is solidification or melting going on. So solid liquid phase change is occurring and there is no heat source. Okay. So whatever temperature or heat input or heat extraction is occurring due to the boundary conditions. Within the domain, there is no heat source. Okay. So if we look at the conservation equation, because it is a phase change problem, solidification or melting, we cannot take only the sensible heat, we have to take the latent heat also, because for the same temperature the liquid will have higher energy as compared to the solid. So as a result, we have to take the latent heat. So our equation will be of this form: del T of rho h which is the unsteady term, plus del dot rho UH, which is the convective term, plus del dot is equal to del dot K del T. But because there is no source term, we are not having any source term here. Okay. What is H? H is the total enthalpy, which is a summation of the sensible enthalpy, Cp into T. Cp is the specific heat, T is the temperature. T is from some reference state. It can be from absolute zero or any other reference state. It does not matter because ultimately we will be dealing with only differences in enthalpy, not the actual enthalpies. So this is the sensible part, and FLL is the latent heat part. L is the latent heat of melting or solidification. So how much energy is required per unit mass for melting to occur, and FL is the volume fraction of liquid in a control volume. So if 50% of the volume fraction is liquid, then the extra energy due to latent energy is 0.5, means 50% into the total latent energy of liquid. If the full control volume is liquid, it means that 1 into L. So total extra latent energy is L. If none of it is liquid, then FL is 0, and latent energy is 0 in that control volume because it is solid. So it gives us the variation in latent energy with the volume fraction. Okay. Mass fraction, sorry, not volume fraction. This is mass fraction. Fraction of liquid. Okay. So anyway, so we write, so based on the energy balance, the governing equation comes out in this form. This can be easily derived if you take a small control volume and try to do the energy balance. How much energy is there, how much it is changing with time, and what is the energy coming in with the flow, and what is the energy coming in due to conduction. So by doing all the energy balance, you will be able to derive this equation. You have to do it for a small control volume. Okay. So anyway, because it's a 2D problem, we will write this in 2D. Del T of rho h plus del x of rho uh, where u is the x direction velocity component, plus del y of rho vh, v is the y direction velocity component, is equal to del x of k del t del x plus del y of k del t del y. So this is our governing equation for this problem. 2D, two-dimensional, two-phase heat transfer problem without heat source. Okay. So this looks different from this form that we want to put in. You have H terms as well as T terms. We want to put them all in the same form of phi. Okay. If you have some terms which are in terms of H and some in terms of T, then you cannot use the standard algorithms for solving. You need to use some other algorithm. So we can either formulate the equation in terms of H or in terms of T. General practice is that to formulate the equation in terms of the temperature T. Okay. So we want to put it in the same form as the general conservation equation with T as the variable phi. Okay. So we want to put in this form where phi, instead of phi, we have T. Okay. So let us do that. So H, as you know, where is our H? CPT plus FLL. Okay. So del T of rho CPT plus rho FLL plus del x of rho u CPT plus rho u FLL. Similarly, del y of rho v CPT plus rho v FLL. This is on the left hand side. Right hand side, del x of k del t del x plus del y of k del t del y. Okay. This is the equation in terms of temperature and extra terms like latent energy terms. So to put in this form, we don't want these terms, latent energy terms in this side. Okay. So what we can do is we can write this as del T of rho CPT plus del x of rho u CPT plus del y of rho v CPT. So these three terms on the left hand side. Then on the right hand side, del x of k del t del x plus del y of k del t del y plus whatever additional terms were there is del t of rho FLL. This will go into the right hand side as a negative term. Okay, minus del t of rho FLL. Similarly here, del x of rho u FLL. So it will go to the right hand side as minus del x of rho u FLL. And the third term will go to the right hand side minus del y of rho v FLL. Why we are putting it on the right hand side? We want to put them as the source term because they do not follow any of the form of these three terms. Okay. So we want to put them as the source term. So finally, we can write the equation by dividing both the sides by Cp. we can write them as del T of rho T, assuming that Cp is constant. If Cp is not constant, we have to solve this form of the equation. Del T of rho T plus del X of rho Ut plus del Y of rho Vt is equal to del X of K by Cp del T del X plus del Y of K by Cp del T del Y plus source term, where source term is these three terms divided by Cp, because we are dividing by Cp. So SH is equal to 1 minus 1 by Cp del T of rho FLL minus 1 by Cp del X of rho U FLL minus 1 by Cp del Y of rho V FLL. Okay. So this is our source term. And if you see the entire equation, this is exactly of the same form of this equation. Okay. So we have the exact same transient term del T of rho T, where phi is T, del X of rho Ut plus del Y of rho Vt. This is the term is equal to del X of K by Cp del T del X plus del Y of K by Cp del T del Y. This term plus source term. So equation is exactly of the same form, where phi is T, gamma is K by Cp. Okay, this gamma is K by Cp, and source term is this entire term. Okay, the entire term is put as the source term. So what we can see here is that, so why I wanted to show you this example is to show that even if the expression is of different form, the governing equation is of different form, by manipulating the terms, by cleverly rearranging the terms, we can put them in the general form. And whatever does not conform to these three terms can be always put into the source term. We'll see later how to tackle the source term, but if any additional terms are there, we just put them in the source term. And it becomes much easier to solve the equation. Any questions? So these governing equations you need to know. Apart from that, we don't need to know any other governing equation for our course because it's a basic course. But there are other equations also which can be tackled using CFD or other forms of the velocity equations. Like for example, if there is compressible flow, then how to solve those type of things are beyond the scope of this course. Okay. So if there are no questions, so let us move on to the next subtopic. So we are discussing about governing equations. Once we discuss about some of the small things, we will go into partial differential equations. Okay. So one of the important aspects, so we cannot just consider governing equations as standalone entities. Okay. So governing equations by themselves cannot give us the correct solution. For example, if we solve the flow through a pipe or flow in a room or flow around an aircraft, we have the same equation, same flow equation, same Navier-Stokes equation, same temperature equation. Then why are the results so different, right? Flow in a pipe will give you a different result. Flow in a room will give you a different result. Flow around an aircraft will give you a different result. So, although we are solving the exact same set of equations. So the reason is because one is that obviously the geometry is different. Pipe has a different control volume. So room has a different control volume. Flow around an aircraft, we will have to take a different control volume. And second point is that the boundary conditions and initial conditions are different for each of the problems. So the same set of equations needs to be solved with correct boundary conditions and correct initial conditions to get the desired result. Just a second. Just a second. All right. So what are boundary conditions, initial conditions? So any equation you want to solve, you need to provide additional information. So if there are special derivatives like del X, del Y, this type of derivatives, corresponding to those derivatives, we need to provide special conditions like conditions at the edge of the control volume, at the boundary of the control volume. Okay. So for example, if there is flow occurring through a pipe, the domain is the pipe. So what is the velocity at the initial, like at the inlet section? What is the velocity at the outlet section? Some boundary condition, whether it's velocity or some other condition needs to be given. And not only that, for all the surfaces we need to give. So for the pipe surface also we need to give that there is zero velocity. Similarly, heat transfer condition. So sometimes students make the mistake here. If they are using ANSYS, they only think in terms of inlet and outlet. They forget that all the other boundaries also have boundary conditions, but because they don't specify them directly, and the software automatically tells them, they consider that there are no other boundary conditions. So remember, for all the boundaries, there need to be boundary conditions for each of the equation. If you are solving for U momentum equation and V momentum equation, so for U momentum equation, for all the boundaries, there should be a condition. For V momentum equation, for all the boundaries, there should be a condition. If you are solving for temperature equation, for all the boundaries, there should be a temperature boundary condition. Okay. Whether it is a closed boundary, a wall, or a flat plate, or whatever, there needs to be a boundary condition. It can be, however, trivial, but it still needs to be there. Second is the initial condition, which is like a boundary condition, but in the temporal direction, in the time direction. Obviously, now time proceeds from one side to the other, so you cannot tell the future. So the temporal condition can only be given on one of the ends, which is the beginning of time. You cannot give at the end of time. So at the beginning of time, the condition that we give is known as initial condition. So for example, flow in a pipe, what is the velocity at time t equal to 0 when the problem is starting? This initial condition has to be given for the entire domain. Okay, it is not only at selective points, it needs to be given for the entire domain. So for all the control volumes, discretized control volumes in the pipe, we need to specify the condition for all the variables that we are solving. If we are solving for u velocity, v velocity, and temperature T, we need to specify what is the value of u, v, and T for all the control volumes at the beginning of time. Again, student makes the mistake here. Students make the mistake that in many cases they don't need to give any initial condition. It is automatically taken care of by the software. But in general, while solving the equation, it is necessary. If you are writing your own code, you have to give the initial condition for all the control volume at the beginning of the problem. Okay. So it is based on the physical condition. For example, for temperature equation, maybe it is equal to the room temperature. Flow may be, velocity may be initially 0. So U velocity may be 0, V velocity may be 0. Temperature is 303 Kelvin, something like that. Depending on the situation, physical situation, we need to give the initial condition. So apart from governing equations, appropriate boundary conditions and initial conditions are required to properly define a CFD problem, as I was mentioning. Otherwise, governing equations may be similar for a varied group of problems, but it is the boundary condition and initial condition and the geometry which makes the problem unique. So there are different types of boundary conditions. Let us take a look at a few examples. During the course, you may be able to understand or come up with many different boundary conditions depending on the situation. We will not cover all of them now. We will just see a few examples to give you a feel of how the boundary conditions look like. Okay. So if we say, let us consider a problem. We want to solve a car is moving in the negative x direction with a velocity of u infinity. Okay, the car is moving over a road in the negative x direction with a velocity of u infinity. Means it is moving towards the left hand side. And we want to find out the flow around the car because of the movement of the car. Okay. So this we want to know by solving the CFD problem regarding this. So if we want to solve the CFD problem for this, what are the governing equations we need to take? So if we consider it as a 2D problem, 3D may be too complicated for us to run. So if what we can do is we can divide it into a 2D problem. 1D may be too simple, may not capture all the details. So 2D may be an ideal situation. Okay. So we can approximate the cross section of the car as a 2D object like shown here, and we can take a larger domain around the car, okay, to take into account. So the car may be like at the bottom also. Here it is not very accurate. It's more like a aircraft, you can say. If the car is at the bottom, because there may not be much gap from the bottom. Okay, so we can take a large volume, surrounding volume around the car if you want to calculate the airflow pattern around it correctly. Okay. So what will be the boundary condition? How will we solve this problem? So say if we take a domain like this, okay, the car is moving from the right to the left. So during the problem, the car will come from one side and it will leave from the other side. Then we will not be able to solve the problem for a longer durations. So what is the way around this? What will be a better way to solve the problem? Did you understand the question? So for example, I have a domain. I have taken a rectangular domain for solving the problem where the car is moving from the right to the left. But during the solution procedure, obviously the car is moving. So it is in this position, then in this position, then on the left hand side, then partially going out of the domain. So we are unable to solve the problem for a longer duration or properly find out the velocity field. Okay. So it means that this is not an appropriate way of solving the problem. So what will be an appropriate way of tackling the problem? What will be a suitable domain to be taken?
Sir, if we consider the car as the body, if we take the car as a reference body, then the relative velocity of air, which is coming from the forward direction, will be the inlet boundary condition, and the
Correct.
and
So,
the surface of the car body will work as a boundary,
yes.
boundary wall type of thing.
So you have to take correct. You have to take the control volume, which is fixed with the reference frame of the car. Okay. So if the car is moving, the control volume is also moving. Means so from our reference point, so it is as if we are sitting on the car. So we see that the control volume is static, but the flow is coming in the opposite direction with u infinity velocity. And in our reference frame, the car is fixed, but the velocity of the inlet is u infinity, and velocity at the outlet far away. If the outlet is sufficiently far away, it will be u infinity. Top velocity is also u infinity if it is not disturbed by the car. And in the bottom, the road is also moving behind on the means in the positive x direction with velocity u infinity. Okay. So the bottom surface itself is moving behind because from the reference point of view of the car, the road is moving in the positive x direction with u infinity. So this is how we need to tackle this problem. Okay. And obviously, because it's a 2D problem, we need to solve the 2D momentum equation, which is the 2D Navier-Stokes equation. So for this example, what is the boundary condition? U is equal to u infinity for all the y, okay, at the inlet, and v is equal to 0. Remember, there are two equations, u equation and v equation. So for u, it is equal to u infinity. V, there is no v direction flow, so v is equal to 0 for all the y at the inlet. At the outlet, there can be different types of boundary condition possible depending on how much distance we are keeping. One way is to put that there is no change occurring in the x direction if it is sufficiently far away. Del u del x equal to 0. And we can either put del v del y equal to 0 or v is equal to 0. Okay. So, or if it is very far away, we can even put u is equal to u infinity and v is equal to 0. Like where the flow is not getting disturbed by the automobile, but that needs to be very far away. So the domain needs to be very large. So this del u del x equal to 0 and del v del y equal to 0 means that there is no change occurring in the x direction and y direction. It means that the flow has fully stabilized. Okay. So how large? So how will you take a suitable domain? What should be the size of this domain? means I am not looking for any number, but the logic behind taking the size of the domain. Means you can say 20 times, 50 times, but what is the logic of taking the size of the domain? How will we select? Because there is no actual domain. Actual domain is very large. So it's entirely air for a very long distance everywhere, on the top side, on the front, on the back. But how much size we should take? If we take too large size, it will lead to more computational time. What will happen if we take a very small size domain, just very near the car, like this? Computational time will be very less, but what is the disadvantage?
Sir, we will not like we cannot analyze the wake regions and turbulence formed after after the car moves away. So uh,
Yes, and not only in the wake region, even in the front. Say this inlet is very close to this boundary. Okay, so you have u infinity you are giving, and suddenly the u infinity has to change the direction. Means the velocity has to change the direction. This is obviously not physically correct, because in the physically correct scenario, the velocity flow has a certain distance over which it smoothly changes directions. Okay, but if you impose the u infinity very near to it, it is not the correct boundary condition, because at very near to the car, the velocity will not be u infinity, it will change directions, right? So the inlet should be sufficiently far away so that there is no effect of the car on the at that distance on the velocity profile. Similarly, the outlet region should be sufficiently far away so that there is no effect of the car on the outlet velocity profile. So generally it should be very large, okay, many times larger than the car. Similarly, the top section should be far away sufficient enough so that there is no effect of the car on the flow profile. So outside this domain, whatever domain we select, the flow should look like normal u infinity in a straight line. The effect of car, like the effect of flow like this. The effect of flow like this. This is the flow around the car. Okay. Diagram is not accurate, but you can get the idea. So outside this domain, this effect should not be present. Then this domain is not sufficiently large enough. Outside the domain, there should only be straight lines like this. Okay. If the flow occurs like this outside the domain, it is not correct. Okay. So the flow domain has to be sufficiently large. So it is up to us to decide what should be the domain based on our experience, and then what are the boundary conditions. Okay. So you can see what are the velocity boundary conditions here. So not only the inlet and outlet, okay, condition, as I was saying, for all the boundaries we need to give the condition. So here we have not even discussed the top boundary and bottom boundary condition. So for top boundary, because it is as if actual case it is static, no air is flow is occurring, but from the reference point of view of the car, the flow is in the x direction with u infinity velocity. So u is equal to u infinity for all the x points, like for all the points along the x direction, and v is equal to 0. There is no v direction flow for all the points along the x direction. This is for the top surface. Bottom surface is the road. The road is moving in the x direction with u infinity speed from the point of view of the car. Okay. So from the point of view of the car, bottom surface is moving in the x direction with speed u infinity. So u is equal to u infinity and v is equal to 0 for all x. Okay. So these are the boundary conditions. Apart from this, on the car surface, there cannot be any flow. So all the velocities u and v are 0. So it is no slip condition, means there is no velocity on the solid surface, and it is impermeable. No flow can also go inside the solid body. This seems obvious, but there can be problems where the flow can go inside the body, like a porous medium or a sponge. Okay, or a lot of biological applications are there where the flow actually can go inside the solid body. So in this case, we are not considering that. So these are all the boundary conditions. Similar way, you have to take boundary conditions appropriately for your problem and define the appropriate geometry. So it is a matter of experience and practice. Let us take a look at other types of boundary conditions. Another boundary condition which can be given for the flow equations is the pressure condition. Instead of velocity, we can specify that at the outlet, pressure is some outlet pressure, maybe atmospheric pressure. Or if we are giving the gauge pressure is the pressure defined with the atmospheric pressure. So gauge pressure is 0. There is no change in pressure. So why the giving the pressure condition will work? Because there is a pressure term also in the equation, and if we give condition for that, that will take care of the solution. For the energy equation, similarly, we can have different types of boundary conditions. Again, you have read in heat transfer, but let us revisit them. So there can be various types of boundary conditions. For example, at the wall, we are not solving for energy equation here, but if we are solving for heat transfer, we can have different types of boundary conditions. One condition which is very common is that at the wall, the temperature itself is given. Okay, so for example, we are considering the heating of a plate from one side, and all the other 3 sides are at a constant temperature of 30 degrees centigrade, and one side is put at 100 degrees centigrade. So we can just provide the temperature values at the boundaries, 30 degree at all the other walls, and one wall is 100 degrees centigrade. So this type of simple boundary condition is known as first type of boundary condition, or Dirichlet boundary condition. Okay. The second type of boundary condition which can be given is, instead of temperature, we can specify the heat flux. So not directly the temperature, but how much heat is coming from the side. So for example, we have the plate now again, but instead of specifying, 3 sides are kept at 30 degrees centigrade. But one side I am not saying that it is 100 degrees centigrade, but I am saying that 100 watt of heat is falling on that plate. Means 100 joule of heat is falling per second on that plate, on that side. So this is a heat flux condition. We are providing how much heat is coming. Like if there is a heater on the side, so these type of conditions are there. Or you are considering the heating of a room, and because of the solar energy, some heating occurs of the walls. So all these are heat flux conditions. So heat flux condition, heat flux at any point is equal to minus k dt dx. As you know, if it is in the z direction, it is minus k dt dx. If it is at any direction, normal direction n, we can write it as minus k del t del n. Okay, at the wall. So there is any wall where the normal direction to the wall, perpendicular to the wall, is the n direction. So the heat flux can be written as minus k del t del n. Okay. So in this problem, if we were to solve where the x boundary conditions have heat flux, okay, so we can if there is no flow, say it's a solid domain and it's like a plate, x condition or heat flux given as 30 watt or 50 watt, we can write in this form. We will know what is q double dash x, okay, because this is the heat flux. So from this we can write what is the value of minus k dt dx, and this later can be used up to find the value of temperature. Although the temperature here is unknown, even at the boundary, this can be part of the equation where the temperature can be found because of this known value. So this type of equation, this type of boundary condition is known as Neumann boundary condition. Okay, Neumann boundary. First is Dirichlet, and the second one is Neumann boundary condition. And one special type of Neumann boundary condition is adiabatic condition, where the heat flux is 0. There is no heat transfer occurring at the site. It is totally insulated. This is very common in many applications, practical applications. You do not have any heat transfer occurring, or the time is so short that there is not sufficient time for heat transfer to occur. Okay. So in those cases, minus k del t del n is equal to 0. So here n is the general normal direction. Okay, don't get confused by n. If it is the x direction, we will write minus k dt dx. If it is the y direction, we will write minus k dt dy. Okay, equal to 0. The other type of boundary condition, which is known as mixed boundary condition, is when even the heat flux is not directly known. Okay, it is based on the convective and radiative heat transfer. What is the difference between this Neumann condition and this? In the Neumann condition, Q double dash W is already given to us. A concrete value is known. Here, the heat flux itself can vary because heat flux will depend on the wall temperature. And wall temperature itself is wall means boundary temperature. Boundary temperature itself is unknown. Okay. So if the boundary temperature is TW, we can write this as the like at the wall the heat transfer is heat flux is minus k dt dx at x equal to 0 is equal to convective heat transfer is H T minus T wall, where T wall is the unknown boundary temperature. Okay, this is itself unknown. We do not know what is the heat flux. This is part of the solution. And T infinity is the faraway liquid temperature. Okay. Similarly, the radiative heat transfer is epsilon sigma Tr to the power 4 minus Tw to the power 4. Tr is the faraway temperature for radiation. Okay. Tw is the again the boundary wall like boundary temperature, which is again unknown. Because Tw is unknown, we cannot know what is the heat flux. So the heat flux itself may vary depending on the Tw. So this is part of the solution process now. So, and it can be tackled, not too difficult to tackle while solving. But this is another type of boundary condition that is also provided for heat transfer. Remember, all the boundaries need to have heat flux condition, even the boundaries which seems trivial, but you need to provide heat transfer condition, means temperature boundary conditions. Any questions? Let us take a break, 5 minutes, and then we will continue. All right, we will continue. And so I hope you can still see the notes. Can somebody confirm and still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we have discussed about equations and we have discussed about boundary conditions briefly. And along the course, we will find out how to solve these equations and what type of boundary conditions to use. Let us discuss a few other important things. One is the concept of dependent and independent variables. Okay. So all the equations that we were seeing, like all the equations that we were discussing, like the say chemical species equation or heat transfer equation or momentum equation. So these variables that we are trying to solve for, like the temperature or enthalpy, okay, velocity U, velocity V, chemical concentration C, all these are dependent variable. Okay, variable for which we are solving the governing equations. These are dependent variable. Why these are dependent variable? Because they depend on other variables. What are these other variables? The other variables are independent variables. So dependent variables varies with respect to these independent variables. Okay. In other words, dependent variables are a function of these independent variables. Okay. So what are the independent variables? So x direction, y direction, z direction, x coordinate, y coordinate, z coordinate, time, t. Okay. These are some examples of independent variables. Okay. For example, in this equation, we are trying to solve for u. So u will vary with time t as well as with x and y. Okay. So u is a function of x, y, and t. We can write u is equal to u x comma y comma t because it's a function of these three variables. Okay. So the three variables are the independent variables, and we were trying to solve for the dependent variable variation along these three independent variable direction. Okay, so along the x direction, y direction, and t direction. So typically dependent variable is the phi variable, which can be u, v, w, t, c as we have discussed, and independent variables are x, y, z, and t. And when we solve a problem, say for this problem that we are considering, we divide the domain into control volumes, right? Into control volumes, right? Like this. Means into small subsections like this. So we divide the domain into control volumes, or we divide the domain into parts which vary along the independent coordinates, independent variables. So if it is a xy, means it is a spatial problem, we will divide it into in the x direction and y direction. If the time is also varying, means if it is a transient problem, we'll also divide the domain into the time direction. We'll take a step of time and we will proceed in the time direction with this step of time, which is known as time step. Okay. So, and at each of these points, discretized point means each of these control volume, depending on x and y direction, we will have the dependent variable value. Okay. So not only along all the space directions, also in the time direction, we will have the dependent variable value. We choose the values of the independent variables at which phi is calculated. Okay. So it is up to us to decide. So if we are discretizing along x and y direction, we can decide at what will be the points at which phi will be calculated. Phi cannot be calculated continuously because it's a numerical problem. We have to divide the domain into small parts, and we cannot divide it into infinite parts because it will take infinite time to solve. So we have to divide it into a finite number of parts, but we can decide what are the lengths of the parts so that what are the points at which the value of phi will be stored and calculated. So that is up to us to decide. And as I was explaining in CFD problems, we divide the domain along the independent variable. Okay. So for example, for a 2D transient problem, 2D means two-dimensional. Transient is variation along time. So we have to divide it into three directions, x, y, and t. We will divide the physical domain into small subdivisions of delta x, delta y size, and time into small subdivisions of delta t size. Okay, so you can see a 2D physical domain rectangle, and we have divided into delta x size, subdomains of delta x size and delta y size. You cannot see the time direction obviously, but in the time direction also we'll solve with delta t sizes. Means first, if delta t is 0.1 second, first we'll solve for 0 second, then we'll solve for 0.1 second, then we'll solve for 0.2 second. So we'll march with this delta t type. It will not be a continuous process. So now that it is clear what are independent variables, what is its role, and what are dependent variables, it is interesting to, or it is important to know that we can reduce the number of independent variables by cleverly formulating the problem. And if we have less number of independent variables, we can reduce the computational time drastically. So dramatically, we can reduce the computational time. Smaller number of independent variables lead to smaller number of subdivisions or grid points, leading to less computational time. Okay, let us consider a case where you are solving for the flow in a room. Okay. So if we want to solve the flow in a 3D pattern, if the flow is very uniform, say it is coming from one side, there is a window open or an AC, and it goes out from the other side, there is a window, the flow is going out. Okay. And or there is an exhaust fan on one side and window open at other side. So we can take the cross section along that central line and we can consider it as a 2D problem. And we can divide the room into say 10 steps along the floor. So along the x direction, if the floor is along the x direction. And if the wall is along the y direction, we can divide it into 10 steps. So in the 2D problem, we will have 100 steps, 100 control volumes like this. So this is the say floor and this is the wall. And flow is coming from one side, going out from other side. Now, if you take this, if you want to solve it more accurately, obviously you have got to take a 3D volume. Or if it is not correct to solve in 2D, maybe the obstacles in the room are such that the flow pattern is very much deviated from the 2D flow pattern. Okay, flow moves around in the third direction a lot. So in that case, we have to take a 3D domain, and if you take the third direction, also you divide it into 10 control volumes, then you have 10 into 10 into 10. So 1000 control volumes instead of 100. So just by changing the number of control volumes, keeping everything else same, from just by taking instead of 2D, we are taking a 3D problem, and we are changing the number of control volumes from 100 to 1000. What will happen is that many of the solution algorithms that we will see later, like matrix inversion, we need to solve. So depending on the number of control volumes, we will have number of equations. If we have n number of control volumes, we have 3n or 4n or whatever, like some linear value into n. So x into a into n number of equations. Okay, let us consider that number of equations will be of the order of the number of grid points or control volumes. So for 100 control volumes, we will have of the order of 100 equations. For 1000 control volumes, we will have of the order of 1000 equations, because for each control volume, we have to solve the governing equations. Okay. So if there are 4 governing equations for each control volume, then 400 equations for 2D and 4000 equations for 3D. Now, or say we are solving only for temperature. So we have 1000 equations for 3D and 100 equations for 2D. So if we solve it, if we solve these equations, some of the algorithms take n cube number of steps to solve n equations. Okay, the number of steps that are required for solving the equation scale as n to the power 3. Okay, there are many algorithms like this. So for example, if I have 100 equations, 100 grid points, and if the time taken is 1 hour for solving that problem, if I have 1000 grid points, which is 10 times more, the time taken will not increase by 10 times. The time taken will increase by cube. Cube of 10 times is 1000. So instead of 1 hour, it will now take me 1000 hours. So typically large CFD problems, it can take 1 day to solve or many days to solve. Say 1 day to solve. Instead of that, it will take 1,000 days to solve, which is 3 years. Obviously, it is not feasible. So we can see that just by, so if we can appropriately reduce a 3D problem to a 2D problem, there can be a dramatic reduction in the time required. Okay, it is not always the case so much reduction is there, because some other algorithms are there which do not scale as n cube, which has better, means you can find the solution in a lesser number of iterations. But in general, this can happen. So we cannot just arbitrarily go for any 3D problem as a 3D problem. We have to discuss, and we have to think whether we can reduce it to a simplified problem which is solvable, or if we just randomly find a domain and create a geometry and run the problem, we might find that it is not getting solved in a reasonable time. Okay. It becomes very important. So this is one very important point. That's why we always try to, even for complex problem, we try to find a way to make it a 2D problem. Okay, and there are many ways to make a complex problem into 2D, even 3D problems into a 2D problem. Okay. Again, let me give another example. So we are solving for the heat transfer in a wall. Okay, or so it's the wall that is facing the sun. So in the morning we have the east face which is facing the sun. So we have boundary condition at the edges of the wall, and the wall is like a 2D plate. Basically, it's a 2D plane, and we want to know the temperature variation along the plane. Okay. So if we know what are the temperatures at the edges of the wall, we can find out the variation of temperature in the wall. It's like a 2D problem. However, the problem is that the heat loss or heat gain that is occurring. So heat loss due to convection or heat gain that is coming in due to the solar energy falling on the wall is in the third direction, which is not part of the solution plane. Solution plane is a plane along the wall. You have to imagine here, because I cannot show you here. But say this paper is the solution plane. Okay. So at the edges of this paper, we are giving the boundary conditions, always at the edges, right? However, the solar energy is coming from the third direction, outside the edge. So from the screen towards the paper, it is coming, or from the inside of the screen towards the paper, it is coming. So this can be solved as a 3D problem, obviously. But if we want to solve it as a 2D problem, it is still possible. How? Because this third direction boundary condition, the energy that is coming, instead of boundary condition, we can reformulate it as if there is a source term over the entire body. Like at each point, there is some energy which is being generated. It is as if like some additional energy is increasing there. This is because of the solar energy that is falling, but we can put it as a source term in the domain. So by cleverly doing this, we can reduce the 3D problem to a 2D problem. So lot of examples are like there. Like in practical problems, we convert a 3D problem to a 2D problem to solve it faster and take appropriate approximations like this. So why it is important, as I was saying, that the time scale can change dramatically with the number of grid points. So again, just to emphasize this, smaller number of independent variables leads to smaller number of subdivisions or grid points, which leads to less computational time. Okay. So some terminology. So if there is only one space coordinate in a problem, we call it a one-dimensional problem. If there is no dependence on time, we call it a steady problem. If there is dependence on time, we call it an unsteady problem. So problems are defined based on these parameters, like for example, unsteady 1D heat conduction problem, 2D steady flow problem, etc. Okay, based on the name, you can understand which are the variables, how many variables are there. Now we can take other combinations of independent variables also. Instead of just taking x, y, z, and t, there can be other ways of solving the equation. Although in general we just take x, y, z, and t, and the commercial softwares also are built like that. But if we are writing our own code, we can reformulate. In many cases, it may be useful also. Say for example, if you are trying to find the variation of temperature in a 3D domain, generally t will vary with x, y, and z. But I can take another independent coordinate, dependent coordinate as z and independent coordinate as temperature. So my independent coordinates will be temperature t x and y, and z is the dependent coordinate. Okay, we are trying to solve for z for given values of x, y, and t. Okay, physically what it means? It means that we are trying to find the value of height from the datum point, the value of height at which temperatures are constant. Okay, we are trying to find the height of the isothermal surface of temperature T at any point xy. Okay. So we can. So what my point is that we can define the problem in different ways also. So what may be seen as traditionally independent variable can also become a dependent variable, depending on the problem. Okay. And the second important thing is that the number of coordinates can be reduced by proper choice of coordinates. Very important point. I have discussed, all the old students know this also. Like I was giving you the example. Similarly, say flow is occurring in a circular pipe. It's a 3D problem in the Cartesian coordinate system because flow is varying along the x, y, and z direction. But if you take a cylindrical coordinate system with the coordinates r, z, and theta, then the variable, any variable like u or v velocity, means whatever is the velocity components, will only vary along the radial direction r and the axial direction z. Okay, in the theta direction, the azimuthal direction, there won't be any variation unless we give a wheel or a twist to the flow. Okay, or circulation. So if there is nothing like that, in general there won't be anything like that. So the variation will be with theta will not be present, and it will become a 2D problem. But the only variation with r and z, and we can much more easily solve this problem, and it may require much less time as compared to solving in Cartesian coordinate. Like the example I was giving, instead of 1,000 hours, it may take 1 hour to solve, just because we have taken a different coordinate system. So sometimes taking a different, just brute force is not correct. So sometimes we do not understand. We just use the whatever is the existing code or whatever is the standard procedure. But if we put a little bit more effort on writing the code, then we can dramatically, based on the problem, if we can define the code in an appropriate way. If we know that we will be only solving for flowing pipes, we are developing a specialized software for say petroleum industry where all the flow will occur in cylindrical shapes. Then we can define our code in that way, and we can get same accurate results, but with much less time. Okay. In industries, you will see that many codes are there which are just 1D codes. So very simplistic 1D codes, but still can give correct estimation because they want quick estimation sometimes. Instead of full-scale CFD, they want quick estimation of some value. So what is the maximum temperature that is occurring in a furnace? So quickly they want to calculate this. Then they may go for full CFD calculation, but there are a lot of 1D codes that are used. This is one example. Okay. Another example is that flow around an aircraft or a moving vehicle. Okay. So this is interesting. So you have an aircraft which is moving along say from the right hand side to the left hand side. The same this problem. Okay, let us now consider that this is an aircraft. So if you are looking from outside, if you are standing in the inertial reference from outside, you are standing on ground, you will see that the flow pattern is changing at all the position with time, right? Because initially, if you're just fixated on a point, if you're just looking at a point where the aircraft has not yet come, there is no flow at that point, or it is equal to wind velocity. Now, when the aircraft comes near it, the velocity suddenly changes at this point because of the effect of the aircraft. Then the aircraft is passing through around this point. The velocity is dramatically different because of the effect of the aircraft. Once the aircraft has passed this region, the effect of wake and turbulence is still there, vortex shading and other things. So that region has different properties or different velocities. Once the aircraft has passed away to a sufficiently far away distance, again the region becomes like the initial condition, like there is no flow or it's just the normal ambient condition. So from our point of view, it is a transient problem. We have to solve it in x, y, z direction as well as time direction, or at least x, y, and time direction. Okay. However, if we fix the coordinate system with the aircraft itself, Okay, so if you are a passenger sitting on the aircraft, from your reference point of view, the flow is not varying with time. If you look around, say at the front of the aircraft, the velocity is always the same from your reference point. So the velocity here is always the same, but it is not changing with time. If you are just sitting on the airplane, velocity on the top is always the same, and along the wake region is always the same. So everywhere the velocity is not varying with time. Obviously, there is variation with space, but there is no variation with time from the reference point of view of the airplane. Okay, so by changing the coordinate system from a fixed coordinate system, where the so for flow around an aircraft, it is an unsteady problem for fixed coordinate system, but it becomes a steady problem in moving coordinate system fixed to the aircraft. Okay, so this is like a cleverly changing the coordinate system in the equations. Obviously, because of the change in coordinate system, some of the terms will be different, but the conservation still holds true. So whether you take a moving reference frame or fixed reference frame, conservation is still true. Conservation of mass, momentum, and energy. So we can convert this unsteady problem into a steady problem. Okay, so it is very useful. Similarly, in material processing also, we are solving some problems where there is a laser which is moving, and we are trying to use that laser to melt a powder bed and then resolidify it. So it is part of like you can say simplistic 3D printing process at a fundamental level. So powder bed is there, we are melting it by so the laser is moving from one side to the other side. If we want to solve it in using CFD, how the melting is occurring and solidification, it's a transient problem. But if you are considering that your domain is fixed with the laser, and your problem like already melted, like if we have already melted the pool, so the molten pool is still there and the laser is fixed and our coordinate is fixed with the laser itself, it becomes like a steady state problem. We will always find that the pool remains of the same shape. Okay. So coordinates has to be selected judicially. Arbitrarily, we cannot just take any coordinate system. We can take and we can use brute force to solve the problem, but another person can just make some small clever changes and their problem may be solved in a much faster way without compromising on the accuracy. Coordinates can also be transformed. Okay, this is one sort of coordinate transformation only, what I was saying, fixed and moving. But even new variables can be formed for coordinate transformation. For example, unsteady heat conduction equation. Okay, what is the heat conduction equation? In terms of enthalpy, it is given for, but in terms of temperature, like this. Okay, this is 3D. If it is 1D, you will have del T plus heat conduction. So no convection is there. Del D dx of alpha dt dx. Okay, something like that. So T will be a function of x and time t, small t. Temperature will be a function of x and small t. Okay, it's a 2D problem. Means although it's a 1D problem, there are two independent variables. The time variable is there. But if we define a variable phi, where phi is given as cx by root t, okay. So then if you solve the problem, you will see that if you reformulate the problem, you will see that t becomes just a function of phi. Why it becomes a function of phi? Because the variation of t is such that the variation along x and by root t means if you consider that it remains similar in nature. So it's like a melting problem. The melt interface moves forward with a distance which is proportional to square root of time. Okay. So similarly, if I have a 1D melting problem, 1D phase change problem, the interface movement or the distance along the x direction is always proportional to square root of time. So if we define a variable which is distance by square root of time, we can simplify the problem further. So this type of solutions have been derived analytically by mathematicians for even much more complex problems like boundary layer theory and other problems. But this is a simple example. We will not go into details, but we can see that instead of say two independent variables, once it becomes one independent variable, we can solve the problem much more easily and with much less time. And then we can revert back to our original solution by reverse coordinate transformation. Similarly, it can be done also for boundary layers. Okay, I don't remember the exact, but I think it is proportional to y by root x or something like that. Y by root x, where y is the y direction and x is the along the x direction. Okay, so all the variables are proportional. So, but the idea is that by clever transformation or choice of coordinates, we can reduce the time required for solving the problem dramatically. So it is not a trivial matter of what is the coordinate system which should take. Okay. Another important concept. Any questions? No questions. Another important concept is the concept of one-way or two-way coordinate. Okay. So what is a one-way coordinate? One-way coordinate is a coordinate system along which the variables which are preceding the current coordinate point. So you are at a point in space, okay, up to which you have solved. So the variables which have already been solved behind this point can influence the value at this point, but the variables which are ahead of this point cannot influence the value at this point. Okay, so only the variables on one side of the point can influence the point. Okay, very common means like the most common example obviously is time. Okay, because we know that time only flows in one direction. So at any point in the problem, so if we are solving for a casting process or say some other process, heat transfer process, so after 10 seconds, whatever is the value of temperature at a point can only be influenced by what has happened in the 10 seconds before that. It cannot be influenced by what will happen after that time. Okay, so at this moment of time, the temperature in my room is influenced by what has happened up to this point in my room. But if in the future I am going to switch on the AC or switch off the AC or switch on the fan, that is not going to influence the temperature at this point. But previously, if I had switched on the AC or switched off the AC, that will influence the temperature at this point. Okay, so it means that information can only pass along one direction. It is very obvious for us because we are in our daily day-to-day life, we know that time is a one-way coordinate. So for time, it feels to us very obvious. Okay, we never put a thought also why it cannot flow in the other direction. Okay, this is how physics works. But whenever there is a time coordinate, our solution becomes much more easier. Why it becomes much more easier? Because we know that the value at a point can only be influenced by the previous points, and so just the previous point value. So if you are dividing the time direction into small steps of delta t, just the previous point value can also be influenced by all these previous points. Okay, so say at this point we find the value based on the previous point value. So the next point value will depend on this point, whatever is the value at this point. So we can just store the value at this point, and the next point we just need to store for 2 points. Okay, two points means at 2 times. Okay. And then when we solve for the next one, we will erase this one, and we will, like, if this is the old time step value and this is the new time step value. So when we go ahead, this new time step value will become the old time step value, and the next one will become the new time step value. So like this, we can proceed by storing the data only at 2 time points. So for all the space points, but only for 2 time points. Okay. So this is known as time marching, and this will dramatically reduce the amount of storage space required for solving a problem. So if we are dividing a domain into 100 grid points along the x direction, 100 grid points along the y direction, and 100 time points along the time direction, So we need to store the data for 100 by 100 grid points. So 10,000 for 10,000 points, we have to store the temperature. But we do not need to store the 10,000 points temperature for the 100 time steps. If we store for all the 100 time steps, then it will lead to 1 million temperature values. Okay, but we can just store for two times. Okay, previous and current. So instead of 1 million, we can just store for 20,000 points. So it will dramatically reduce the time required. So once we go to the next time step, we will erase the previous time step and we will go to the next time. So anyway, we'll discuss this later in much more detail. But this is just to give you an idea of what is a one-way coordinate and how is it beneficial. So time is a one-way coordinate. Only previous values can influence the current values. Strong 1D flow is also a one-way coordinate. It's not that only time can be a one-way coordinate. Strong 1D flow can also be a one-way coordinate. Okay. So a flow is occurring in a pipe with a strong velocity. Okay. If I put a drop of ink at this point, okay, this drop of ink, because of the strong flow from the left to the right, this drop of ink cannot go in the left direction. Okay, there will be some diffusion, but the diffusion will be so less as compared to the flow. The diffusion will have no part. Okay, so the drop of ink will only influence the mixture in the other direction, downstream direction. There will not be any effect on the upstream direction. This is like our time behavior. This is like a 1D problem. This is like a one-way coordinate problem. Okay. Any change that occurs here, if I put a heater here, okay, in the water I have put a heater here. That heater will only, because of the strong flow, the heat will be carried only in the downstream direction. So that heater will affect the temperature on the downstream direction, but will not affect the temperature before the heater in the upstream. Upstream means before a point and downstream is after the point. In the upstream direction, there is going to be no effect of the heater. So any change that occurs here is only affecting the future points, and the values at this point is only affected by the previous points. Okay. So if I put a heater here, another heater here, this point value is not going to be affected because of this new heater. But if I put a heater at this left hand side, it is going to affect the point value here. So any change at this point is only governed by this previous value. So it's like a one-way coordinate problem, and we can solve it like a time marching problem. But instead of time marching, we can just march along the space x direction, and we can store much less data for solving this problem. If you can identify this type of one-way coordinate, it is much more suitable for us. Okay. So instead of using brute force, if you solve it directly without thinking anything, you will just solve it like a 2D normal problem, two-way coordinate problem, and still get the correct result. But if we could have identified, we could have modified our code a little bit to take into account this nature of the flow, then we could have solved the problem maybe 100 times faster. On the other hand, two-way coordinate is a like a type of problem where the change at any point influences the variables in both sides. Okay, this is very dominant in diffusion, like strong diffusion problems, like heat conduction. So if I put a heater in a plate at this point, it will change the temperature in both the direction, in this negative x direction as well as positive x direction. Okay, so and the value here will also get influenced by what is happening on the left side or right side. If another heater is put here, or if I put an ice cube here, then this point temperature will get influenced. If I put ice cube here, then also this point temperature will get influenced. So the point can get influenced by values in both directions, and the point itself can influence the value in both directions. So this type of problem is known as two-way coordinate problem. A temperature dependent on values on both sides. Flow problem can also become two-way if the flow is not strong. So the ink drop. So I have dropped a drop of ink, I was saying, but the flow is very slow. Okay. So you will see that the flow is not strong enough to carry away the ink. So the ink will diffuse into the entire domain slowly. So it will also influence with over a long period of time. Some ink will come into the negative x direction, means in the other direction also. Okay. So for very small velocities, diffusion is dominant process, and flow can be like flow problem will be a two-way coordinate problem. So why we are discussing this? Because identifying one-way coordinate system is computationally advantageous, as I have already discussed. needs significantly less space for storing the data during the solution. So storing the data itself takes a lot of time, because at every time or every iteration you're storing the data and retrieving the data. So it actually, not only the computation that takes the time, storing also takes a lot of time. If you run a problem and if you run it using, so actually our RAM plays a lot of important part, and the L3 cache in running the problem. But if you are using a traditional hard disk for solving a CFD problem, you will see that it is running slower as compared to if you use a modern SSD for storing the data and you are running the problem from the SSD. It will run faster. Correct. So storing itself takes a lot of time, because so much data has to be stored and retrieved at every iteration. Marching in forward direction is possible. Thus, we can use the same storage space again and again. That is why what my point was there, but it is written in a better way here. So if I know the value at t and t plus delta t, in the next time step, I will just make this t plus delta t as the old value and the new value as this point value, like this. So I will always just store at 2 points of time, the old time and the new time. Okay, so at t and delta t, and we can march along in the time direction. Any questions? So just try to understand these important small things that we have discussed, because these are some things we forget along the way when we go into more complicated. Even us, like when we are doing research, we along the way that these are some of the so basic things that we even don't bother with this. We just try to use or solve a problem using brute force. But and then we say that, oh, the problem is so complicated, it is taking us 10 days to run, 20 days to run. But if we had cleverly developed the problem, maybe we could have defined in such a way so that it would have dramatically reduced the time required. So it is a one-time effort. And then if we want to run 100 simulations, it takes much less time. But we are unwilling to give that one-time effort in changing the code and writing the code. And as a result, later on, every simulation takes, say, 20 days to run, 30 days to run. And it is very common in proper research. Like in our cases, many of the simulations we run. And we are publishing papers also on this. Takes 20, 30 days to run, even with very coarse geometry. Like I am taking 40 by 40 by 40 or 50 by 50 by 50 grid points, where ideally I should have taken 200 grid points or something like, which will take years to run. Okay. So, but it is too much effort to change the way of solving. So we are sticking with that. But if somebody writes a new code, it is very easy to apply these principles. These are some of the very fundamental principles that we were discussing. Particularly the problem that I see any students do is when they are solving for flow in a pipe and they assume XYZ, use XYZ coordinate system for solving this. It will take much longer time. To solve it using R theta Z coordinate system, it becomes a very simple problem. So that's and we know this analytically. When we solve it, we use R theta Z system. So instead of XYZ system. So that same principle can be applied for. So or in a sphere, heat transfer in a sphere. If you solve it in XYZ coordinate, it's a complex 3D problem. If you solve it in a spherical coordinate system, it becomes a much simpler 1D type of problem. Okay. So I will not start the PD. So we will go into the depth of partial differential equations from the next